Good morning. I'm Brittany Overton, Chair of the New Hampshire Library Association Sustainability Committee and Adult Services Librarian at Hooksett Library. On behalf of all members of the Sustainability Committee, I'm pleased to welcome all of you who are joining us for this program, Beyond Light Bulbs and Solar Panels. Our speakers this morning are two national leaders on sustainability in libraries, Rebekkah Smith Aldrich, co-founder of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative and also executive director of the Mid-Hudson Library System of New York, and also Annemarie Gordon, sustainability coordinator of the Suffolk Cooperative Library System and coordinator for the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. Before I turn things over to Rebekkah and Annemarie, I'd like to ask that anyone who's not speaking, please just keep your microphone muted, please. And if you have questions for our presenter, you may put them in the chat. And once we get to the Q&A session, you can use the raise hand feature at the end of the presentation. So now I'll turn it over to our presenters. Thank you, Rebekkah and Annemarie, for being here this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. We were just reminiscing that the last time I was supposed to be here was April of 2020 and was my first speaking engagement to be canceled due to the pandemic. So thanks so much for having us back. So today our goal is to start really broad and think about climate change and the urgency behind it and what it looks like when libraries are leaders on the topic of sustainability, to start to really dig down and dig deep on the topic of climate mitigation and climate adaptation. So today I'll be speaking a bit about the philosophy and the kind of why we're working on this work and how our thinking has developed to a point where we find entry points for libraries to be doing work in this area. We're going to show you some practical examples of how libraries are doing work in the area of sustainable thinking, and Annemarie is going to introduce you to a methodology that might be attractive to some people online with us here today in terms of how to approach what can often feel like a very overwhelming topic. We don't want you paralyzed by the work. We want you to feel empowered and to have a path forward. And the work we've been doing at the Sustainable Libraries Initiative might be a good fit for your library. So before we get started, I just wanted to point out, I did say we were going to start broad. So this is how broad we're starting. We're thinking about the entire planet, right? And we got a heavy dose over the past 2 years of what it looks like to be a global community as we face down the pandemic, and really had to come together as communities to flatten the curve and to help really keep down the infection rate so we stopped overwhelming our healthcare system. So we got a very acute experience of working together on a very large problem and really seeing measurable change over time. And it was not easy a lot of the time to do that work, but in a way it's prepared many of us for the work that's necessary when it comes to combating climate change. That's another massive global problem that has ties into the economy and society and how we think about just about every decision that we make. So it's not unlike the situation that we've had with the pandemic. It's just a much longer, let's say, chaotic issue that we're dealing with that has far-reaching implications, much longer than COVID will, actually, not to start out with being too much of a bummer, but climate change is no doubt here to stay for a while. And so not only dealing with the problems we've been seeing rising for several decades now, but also dealing with the realities of today. And the pandemic really forced us to deal with the realities of today in a very acute manner. We're going to start to feel that urgency more and more when it comes to climate change issues. And this is obviously not a new topic. We've all been watching the headlines for a very long time. Before COVID arrived, we were seeing reports coming out of the United Nations. They have a fabulous group of folks, climate scientists and policymakers, that are called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And they've been making predictions and I think policy direction for years for folks across the globe, trying to help raise awareness that climate change is already here. It's no longer about saving the earth, but saving ourselves. And so we're already seeing the effects of this. You yourself may have been experiencing more severe weather. Back in 2014, they were predicting rising sea levels and more flooding, acute health issues due to air pollution, which we're seeing ongoing to this day. We're seeing food security compromised by lack of biodiversity and drought and transportation issues caused by, I don't know, conflicts over in other countries that are pushing up the price of gas. So we can see the reality of this just in the past 2 years. And so I think more people are tuned in to the interconnectedness of our world and understanding that scarcity issues and dire health effects related to issues like climate change and COVID are putting a lot of pressure on already overpressurized social situations that are causing conflicts, sometimes physical conflicts in our communities and our nations and across the world. So as we start to unravel this issue, you can understand the weightiness of it and how it can affect every aspect of our life. It's predicted that every single child alive today is going to be negatively impacted by climate change. And that's something that should be motivating to more and more people as we think that one through, of what type of world we're leaving for the next generation who comes up. We're seeing climate scientists talk about 2021 as being the best it will ever be for a very long time. And when we look at some of the headlines from 2020, 2021, as they relate to climate change affected issues, from record-setting wildfires in the West to record-setting heat in the Southwest to the most named storms in the Atlantic hurricane season last year, and we're on pace to beat what we saw last year, we can understand this is a problem that is arrived very loudly and maybe getting drowned out by more acute issues in the political sphere or the COVID sphere of our lives. But these are things that are having very negative impacts on people's lives today. It's very, very in your face. Last September, we had a friend share from just one county south of where I am sitting right now in Westchester County, looking at flooding they have never seen before coming into Westchester County. Normally, we associate flooding in coastal areas and actually mountainous areas, but now we're seeing it in between, way more than we've ever seen it before. So this is my friend Mike, who posted how the Bronx River and the Bronx River Parkway became one, which anyone who's driven on the Bronx River Parkway, you know that road is challenging enough. You don't need any water to slog through as well. Lower left there is a youth services librarian showing how far the water came up in his apartment, looking at cars being tossed around. These are things that most people think happen in other places, but now we're seeing these things happen where we are, where we live, the communities that we serve here in the Northeast. It's getting closer and closer to home if it hasn't already affected you at home. So when we see messages like the one that came out last year from the UN Secretary General saying, hey, hi, code red. What are you waiting for? Now is the time. I think we all think about, oh yes, I recycle and I've got my reusable water bottle over here and aren't I wonderful? But the truth is we've got to up our game in a very, very big way, because a lot of folks are watching the leaders of today, and that includes library leaders, about what choices we're making, how we live our values out loud, and what it looks like in our communities moving forward. I hope many of you recognize the face of this next person, Greta Thunberg, who's the youngest, perhaps, climate activist to rise to public recognition. But several years ago, she was calling out adults on a very public stage saying, hey, thoughts and prayers, that's very nice, but I don't want your hope anymore. I want to see action. And that's what we're hearing from a younger generation who's willing to do work, to make big changes, to change how the economy works for them, to change what work looks like for them, perhaps to live in different ways than generations that came before them were willing to do. So libraries, in our opinion, need to position themselves as allies to this younger generation who wants to see a different world, who wants to see things done differently, and is willing to co-create that future with us. So what is that going to start to look like as a society, as smaller communities, and at your library, where you do have a sphere of influence to make different choices moving forward? So something that a team that I'm working on some work with right now on disaster preparedness, we just finished a book last year that you might have saw come out from ALA called Libraries and Sustainability. And we wrote a whole chapter on something called the donut economy, which is an economic theory from a British economist, Kate Raworth. If you're not familiar with it, I'm going to break it down for you real quick here. The idea is that we need a major economic shift in order to combat climate change and make a society for people where they can thrive in the future. And that takes a holistic look at the world around us. It's respecting the ecological ceiling, the actual limits of natural resources, and actually having clean air and clean water and safe spaces to live. And then the inner crust of that donut that we see there is the social foundation, actually dealing with social issues that are causing disruption and perhaps disenfranchising folks who deserve to have a voice, to be treated with empathy and equity equity and how that looks in terms of building a world where everyone can thrive, not just those with a lot of money or who live on the high ground in our geography. So what we're looking for is to create that balance of a safe and just space for humanity. And I'm guessing that resonates with many people on the call today, because I bet that's what you work on too every day at your library. You're looking to level the playing field. You're looking to help increase access to information, create an informed citizenry so we have a functioning democracy. I don't know. Some of those things kind of fit pretty well with the donut economic theory. Now, when Professor Raworth actually kind of started measuring this stuff, very clearly the donut is not working. It's out of whack. We've got stuff all over the place in heightened levels that are unhealthy for humans and certainly unhealthy for our ecology. So we also have been dealing with the social constructs that are not working anymore in our world, from the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd and the uprising for racial justice in our country here in the US, to thinking about what it looks like to treat everyone with empathy and respect. These should be basic tenets, right, of living in our communities, but there is work to be done. So bringing all this into alignment is no small job. And this is the moment when I like to pause and say to you, just take a breath. I don't want you to be overwhelmed, because you still have to do some work in here, but you can't do it all at once. So what we're here to do today is to simplify things for you and help you see entry points to work that's going to make a lasting difference where you have influence. So that group I mentioned from the United Nations, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in a report they issued now actually 6 or 7 years ago, they outlined 4 key things for us to focus on. And I bet you think right now, oh, it's probably going to be like, carbon mitigation and building seawalls, but it's actually all focused on how we work together as communities. These 4 things are seen as key to combating many of the issues you saw in the red in the donut economics slide just before this one. We're talking about focusing on local, finding grassroots folks who want to do good work together and address the issues of your community. That working together is the only way forward. These top-down ideas really aren't getting the buy-in necessary to make true change. That we have to recognize and value diversity, that diversity of experience, of culture, of economic background, of worldviews. All of these folks have strong information and strong wisdom to bring to the table to do collective problem solving in the face of whatever disruption your community might be faced with. And then, of course, helping all to be heard. And that's the one that made me sit up straight when I read it, because I'm like, you know what, all of a sudden this is starting to sound like what we do in libraries on a regular basis, right? We're respecting intellectual freedom. We're inviting everyone through our doors. We're some of the only folks in our communities talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are a catalyst for change in our communities if we choose to own that role for specific purposes. And so that's what we're really interested in at the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, is really being strategic about how we talk about what libraries do and what choices we make in the future that better explain the values we hold as institutions and work towards a common purpose with the communities that we serve. So this idea of being strategic requires us to deliberately make different choices. And that's what we're here to talk about, of what that's starting to look like in the field and the methodology we're finding that helps make something so huge and systemic feel actually doable at a library level, regardless of your size of library, size of staff, board, and budget. We find that we really need to have scalable solutions where everyone feels empowered to do work in that area. So hopefully you've heard by now that the American Library Association has named sustainability as a core value of the profession. That happened in 2019. Then, of course, a lot of the messaging around that got a little lost in the roar of the pandemic over the past few years. But we're here to reignite that roar for people, because we feel this is a really strong path forward. So people use the word sustainability a lot in our world, but ALA was very careful to clearly define it using the triple bottom line format to define sustainability and what that looks like in libraries when you're making choices about purchases, facilities, how you actually design a strategic plan to help your community. So the triple bottom line, if you're not familiar with it, it's actually a business concept that's been translated for our world here in libraries. But the idea is to get better and better at making decisions that find balance amongst these three things, not just environmental stewardship, but also economic feasibility and social equity. You can apply this thinking to everything from what summer reading program incentives you buy, to how you do a renovation project at your library, even to how you write policy at your library. You can never find perhaps the perfect item or policy, but you can certainly make a good faith effort to get closer to the center of this Venn diagram to create more sustainable choices and outcomes for your staff, for your organization, and for your community. So when we think about boiling down donut economics, we're actually just starting to think about how we make decisions. Let's use a framework that results in healthier decisions for ourselves, for our workers, for our communities, for the planet. Let's actually champion the planet here in some of these decisions that we're making, and understand that it's not going to be a checklist. It's going to be an organic decision-making process at your library. But at the end of the day, to make it even simpler, we need everything to go back to the idea of social cohesion, of how do we provide policies, working environments, public institutions, civic engagement opportunities, and communities where people feel respected and heard and are willing to work together and understand where other folks are coming from so that they can do good work together in the future. The very nature of disruption is that you do not know what it's going to look like. You don't necessarily know what the ultimate effect of climate change is going to be in your area, or certain political decisions or economic decisions. But what you do know is that you need a strong community to rise up and come together and help to problem solve, much like we saw in so many communities during the pandemic. A very good example, but we might have trouble keeping people's attention because climate change feels slow moving often, and we don't perk up until there's an acute issue with a severe weather event. But we need folks thinking more comprehensively about being together as a team on a regular basis. And so starting to model that at your library with your library workers and library boards, that's a great place to live by example and serve as a model in a community for the way it really should look if things are working well and we truly want to work together to make the world a better place. So we're super interested in positioning libraries as sustainability leaders in our communities. And we're starting to see the fruits of our labor in this work over the past 7 years. We're seeing libraries who really get it and start doing this work and talking about what they're doing publicly, getting a different level of respect and notice in their communities. So you might be familiar with the Center for the Future of Libraries, which is centered at the American Library Association. They've been doing trend spotting for many years. And early on, they talked about this idea of collective impact, that we're often very well-intentioned people doing good work in a silo. So we're, kind of finding our way and figuring it out on our own. And then we have great organizations like the New Hampshire Library Association or the American Library Association who start to say, let's get a little more organized about this and start moving in a direction that would actually make a difference. So you can see this evolution of like individuals kind of ping-ponging around to maybe being a little more focused on, yes, we're going to work on minimizing greenhouse gas emissions, but we're all doing it in different ways and we're not really talking about it comprehensively. But let's move into some different behavior. Let's actually all agree the areas where work is necessary and pull in the same direction as hard as we can. And that's when cool things start to happen, whether it's in the library community or in your local town. When you find other like-minded folks and you start going in the same direction, really important changes can happen and big things can happen, bigger than perhaps you can do on your own as a library. So that same power we found by working together through our library associations, we find by working together with folks in our communities as well. And that is absolutely key to this work, which is really centering your work locally. It's super easy, right, to read Library Journal or American Libraries Magazine and just, cherry pick ideas and bring them into your community. But if they don't meet an actual need or they don't reflect the aspirations of your community, they often fall flat. So the celebration of local through this work is incredibly important. To respect folks who are already doing work in this space, to celebrate local farmers, local restaurant owners, local artists, and bringing folks of all walks of life together to have conversations around these issues is really, I think, what creates the momentum and energy for good things to happen in a community, regardless of the particular challenge you might be facing. So at the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, where I volunteer my time and Annemarie is a paid staff person, we've been developing tools to help library leaders think about this work and maybe move the dial, change that kind of trajectory that you might be on in thinking about this. There's a free resource called the Roadmap to Sustainability. You can download that as a mobile app. We just partnered with OCLC to upgrade the app, and it's now available for both iOS and Android. You can also get a PDF copy of it if you like things in print, if you sign up for the, again, free newsletter. And this is a place for individuals to gather your thinking, identify what you're already doing that really could be talked about perhaps in a different way, identify like-minded partners in your community, and maybe start thinking about low-hanging fruit, things you can do that demonstrate your library's commitment to building a more sustainable world, whether that be through climate change mitigation or community resilience building, whatever it needs to look like. We have to start gathering our own thinking so we can be articulate when we invite others to do the work alongside of us. Those of you who are further down the path and thinking about this, we have another program called the Sustainable Library Certification Program. And in a few minutes, Annemarie is going to dive into that a little more for folks who are interested in that. But that's where we actually make the unimaginable bite-sized and doable, and finding a way to actually do good work in a methodical way that changes organizational culture and advances, I think, the library's reputation in our communities as a leader on these topics. So all of this work is designed around that same definition that ALA uses of the triple bottom line. So here's a shinier graphic that we produced in-house at the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. But again, helping people just make better decisions in all areas of our work at libraries. And Annemarie is going to show you an itemized list of the categories that we do this work in. But all of these individual actions should be leading up to creating sustainable libraries, libraries that lead from the inside out by making good decisions in-house so that you're authentic when you're out in the community offering programs and services and seeking partnerships, that you're a trusted partner on these topics. So, you know, that can take many different formats, but I think having a board and staff who get it, who understand it, who are all pulling in the same direction, where you're embedding policies that really make a difference for the long-term operation of your library, how you operate your building, how you clean your building, all these little things add up, right, to tell a story about who you are. And then designing programs and services that truly provide catalysts for social cohesion, bringing people together, helping them learn together, maybe socialize together to feel more like neighbors. That's going to be one of the, really, I think, the easiest but most impactful things. So how convenient is that, right? One of the most impactful things might actually be one of the easiest things you design towards. But then being very mindful and deliberate in working towards climate mitigation, which is just a fancy way of saying reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's why electric vehicles are on the rise. It's why you're seeing more electric vehicle charging stations pop up all over the place. It's why people are incentivizing electrifying our HVAC systems in bigger buildings. We want to emit less greenhouse gas emissions. That's what's driving climate change and making it worse and worse and worse. And then unfortunately, what has to happen at the exact same time is focusing on climate adaptation, because climate change is here to stay for at least the next 3 decades. Even if we did everything perfectly when it came to climate change mitigation, we are going to see more severe weather. We are going to see more severe heat. We need to help our communities be prepared to thrive in the face of these things that are going to happen, or at least be prepared to bounce back quicker and more efficiently than they would had they not been thinking about this work. So that's another component of the certification program to help folks think through disaster preparedness and community resilience, how libraries partner up with folks in a community to do this work. So I'm going to just take my last few minutes here to show you what it looks like in libraries that are really deliberately doing structured work in these areas. And then Annemarie is going to walk you through some of the particulars of the program. But we mentioned that this is a very holistic approach. So this means from the inside out. The Hendrick Hudson Free Library in Westchester County, New York, first library certified under the program. Part of what they focused on was sustainable staffing. So that meant taking a look at what they were paying their staff, making sure they pay not just a minimum wage, but a living wage, making sure library workers receive benefits that actually are humane. So again, treating people the way we want others to treat us needs to start basically at home. And so that's part of the program, to make sure our library workers are respected in the work, and that health and wellness is a centering point for work inside of a library. We're also looking at how you operate the library from a facility standpoint. This was an amazing story out of the Patchogue Medford Library in Suffolk County, New York, that was actually repeated at 3 other libraries, where they actually did not have a way to do recycling. They could certainly sort things in-house for recycling, but there was literally no commercial recycler to come and pick it up. So they had to figure out a kind of homegrown solution to actually do recycling. And when we're confronted with the fact that only 5% of plastics actually get recycled, this is a massive problem that finding a homegrown solution for was pretty exciting. They're not the only library that had to do this, as I mentioned. The Lindenhurst Library, which we're going to talk about in a second, also had to do this. And because they decided to focus on it and then called their village and said, hey, how come we're not able to recycle here? And the village was like, yeah, why aren't we able to recycle here? The village started picking up their recycling at no charge and figured out a solution for everyone in the village. So sometimes just by asking a question, you can be a leader on a topic. And I don't mean ask the question in a whiny way. I mean like an honest, authentic question, like, wouldn't it be great if we could all do this? Not like, oh my God, how come we can't do this here, right? It's tone of voice, it's leadership, as we're trying to lead the way to better choices, not just for ourselves, but our neighbors as well. The Longwood Library, also in Suffolk County, they took, in New York State, we have a green cleaning training program our state provides for free. They also use environmentally friendly cleaning materials and cleaning products, and they do training for all staff on how to contribute to creating a green, clean building. So they're using much less toxic chemicals in their building. This is Lindenhurst, who I mentioned before. They did a great job on transportation issues. Installing this bike repair station is not really even the highlight of what they did. The library did such a good job positioning themselves as a leader on the topic of sustainability through the program. The county executive actually held a press conference in their parking lot on Earth Day this year to announce a $12 million investment in electric vehicle charging stations, and specifically said the first ones were going in library parking lots because libraries are leaders on the topic of sustainability. So a fabulous success story showing that when you deliberately choose this role in your community, not only perhaps will your reputation improve in town, it might even draw new money into the library for infrastructure issues, because other organizations have these goals too, and perhaps are looking for outlets for demonstration gardens or something like electric vehicle infrastructure in the future. So I love this little picture of the bike repair kit, but we're going to replace this with some new pictures of electric vehicle charging stations soon. This is the Saratoga Springs Library. I bet a lot of you have been to Saratoga Springs, New York. It's a nice tourist destination. They use their community read program as a platform to talk about climate change and social equity. And when I look at their list of partners who help with the community read, it's just like a dream list of partners, from higher education to business to government to nonprofits. Everyone got on board for these conversations. And the spin-off events from the community read were just beautiful. Just, you know, folks getting together to clean up parks and to think differently about how we might make a decision about a parking garage in the middle of town. It really provided a catalyst for like-minded folks to get together and organize and find common solutions that were more palatable to more people in the community when it came to issues around climate change, or climate change adjacent issues, I should say. This is the South Huntington Library. Their director, Janet, is on our board as well, but she's finished the certification program. Some of her focused areas were on folks where English was not their first language. She ended up hiring someone who spoke Spanish for the first time in the library's history. They focused on preparedness program and first responder appreciation, which is a big part of becoming, I think, a player on the stage when it comes to building community resilience in the face of severe weather events in a community. Social cohesion, we mentioned, a centerpiece of the work. This is the Haverstraw King's Daughter Public Library over in Rockland County in New York. They really focus on how to bring more people together to feel like neighbors. So not just educational programs, but things like the Mother's Day tea or the Veterans Recognition Luncheon, things that more people can find common ground with, right? Most everyone has a mom. Most everyone respects veterans and their service to our country. And finding ways to bring people together on perhaps less controversial topics, but lets each other see each other as humans, as neighbors, just like get to know each other and have a little more respect for one another. So they, of course, had fun with this topic as well, as you can see from some of the pictures here. But I think we often aren't as proud as we should be of programs that are going on at the library that truly do contribute to social cohesion. I had a director who was shy of talking about her fiber arts group, who was doing knitting projects and crocheting projects. And maybe on paper, it didn't look like it was making a big difference in the community. But if you are in the room with the people who come to that program and you hear what they're talking about, other amazing things come out of those conversations, from new people in the community feeling welcomed to organizing around other issues. That was actually the core group in that town who started helping distribute masks at the beginning of the pandemic when we couldn't get our hands on the medical grade masks because we needed them for the healthcare providers. So it's interesting, right? Those catalysts, those sparks that can come out of work that we do in seemingly innocuous ways. So that's my quick tour of some of the cool things that are going on in libraries that are deliberately choosing to be leaders on the topic of sustainability. And now I want to turn things over to my friend Annemarie, who's going to talk to you about the Sustainable Library Certification Program itself to see if it might be something that appeals to you as a methodical way to move forward in this work.
Thank you, Rebecca. I love, it makes me so proud that we have like Longwood Library, who has this gorgeous LEED certified building. And what we showcase from them is like the $10 Amazon drying rack and microfiber cloths, like every single time. Because, but that's, that's what it is. I mean, you don't, what we highlight and what this program encourages is that these small steps add up. We don't expect every library that signs up for a program to have or plan the LEED certified building, but what's achievable on any scale is to realize that you're throwing away paper towels and what can you do to, to reduce waste, to save money, and to make a change that's better for the environment. Well, you can invest $20 and, use some space in your basement to dry microfiber cloths, and they continue to do that every day in their state-of-the-art space. So all the slides, the examples that Rebecca gave are from libraries that have gone through our certification program. We have right now nearly 60 libraries and have expanded nationwide. So registration is open for libraries everywhere in the country right now. Right now, we've bridged so far into 4 different states, and we have all your neighbors, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine, and Massachusetts are represented right now in members of our program. And the certification program, as Rebecca said, the goal is to alleviate the paralysis. These are big pressing problems, but by coming up with strategies that you can align all the different functions of your library with, can break down what seems overwhelming into more manageable bite-sized chunks. So we have programs for public and academic libraries, school librarians, and are opening up library systems as well. So with the different categories, if you look at the list that we have, the organizational commitment is really focusing on the policy, making sure that when you enact these strategies, that these are not dependent on any one person at the library or current administration. By having in policy your commitment to sustainability, we want to ensure that this going through this program is building a foundation that's going to be lasting. Energy, land, and water use, as you can see from some of the examples. And what we look for in our program is beyond, it can be things that you already have in place. I like to encourage libraries, like, we are not going to punish you for having been thinking sustainably for years now, or putting up solar panels already. We don't expect you to like reconvert to LED lights if you already have. We do account for like the changes that you've made over the last couple of years, especially to your building. I think looking at energy use, energy efficiency is such a great place to start, or at least like bring your community in to the idea of sustainability, because cost savings from reducing energy is going to appeal to pretty much everyone in your community. And waste recycling and purchasing, this is where we see a lot of innovative ideas coming. We have from libraries who have just started putting their recycling out, because there's a long chain of people between the rule makers that say that we won't pick up from commercial properties and the actual truck drivers who just see the bags out. We've been known to take advantage of that where we can, though that's not necessarily sustainable. It does solve a problem for us. But to actually working with municipalities to increase the recycling available. And a lot of times what we've seen libraries do as part of our program are to like branch out and offer the recycling to their community members as well, like battery recycling. And we see a lot of like the green boxes and the like carting services for hard to recycle items. And again, like that's the sort of environmental portion, but there's more to it using the triple bottom line that really gets into looking at your partnerships. Who are you involved with in the community and where can you expand? Social equity, looking at your staffing, looking at your how you're reflecting your community within your library. And of course, like financial sustainability, because we need to look at our own finances, but then also realize that our investments in the community that we make, promoting our community, our small businesses, that we both rise together and that we can work together to strengthen the whole economy of our area. And of course, looking at collections too. How are our collections and what we offer our library, how does that also live our values with sustainability? And then, so how does this work? Like, okay, this sounds great, but like, what do we actually have to do? What we have is an interactive user interface that we, that once you're part of the program to navigate through. So you can see the similar categories lined out here, which again, like to break it down to make it manageable, we even have a little ticker that shows your progress as you work through the program. Once signed up for the certification program, you'll have access to, this is basically, the action item form, and what we refer to as action items are these bite-sized chunks that each of these categories expands into. So you can see that these tasks, there's a lot of little things, but that you can actually sort of like watch them grow as they add up. All of these tasks, what they do is that there's, either some of them, like having a policy, like that's kind of cut and dry. But many of these are really just a space for you to write down what you're doing or what you've tried to do and give us some evidence that this is what you're working on. There's a mixture of required actions, but then also a choice of different recommended actions. And this is where it's flexible and scalable for libraries of all different sizes. We don't expect to see the same thing literally from each individual libraries. There's no sort of cookie cutter idea of a sustainable library. What we have are some mixture of like, yes and no kind of questions, but then a lot of room to tell us about how you've innovated ideas to work with new groups in your community. I think some of the tasks are like, show us one new partnership that you made as part of this program. So you may have already had quite a few partnerships, and there's definitely place for you to explain those to us, but we want to see where this is leading you. We have reflection questions also, like this is where you really help tell the story. And completing this as sort of this large portfolio of work, as I said, adds all these little actions up to have a broader impact, but then also helps us and you explain to your community what you're doing. That sort of packages it together. And I know, like with a lot of us too, it's hard to just like toot your own horn all the time, but by including in your messaging to your community, your progress on the Sustainable Library certification gives you a chance to check in and let everybody know, like, we're working on these things and they're part of a larger project. And it's part of a nationwide network of libraries who all are understanding the importance of this. So it's, meant to just to help you and us help market this whole program to be understandable and cohesive for your community. And so there's several different ways that you can become involved with the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. The free, as Rebekah mentioned, we do have a newsletter that you can sign up for. And in a second, I can put that in the chat. Link to sign up for that. If you sign up for that, we will send you the free PDF of our roadmap to sustainability. But then also you can download that for free through our website right now, also as a mobile app. And we have resources on the website. I encourage you all to look around. We have presentations from all the libraries that have become certified and a list of who's become involved with us. You can also become a member on a membership level for a modest annual fee. And we have that opens up a few more resources to you, our vendor list and our archives of all of our webinars. We have a webinar coming up about workplace wellness, and that's Monday, July 18th. So again, if you look at the events page at our website, you can register for that as well. And see another example of libraries. We have a few panelists who are going to represent us, who are currently part of our program or have finished our program, talk about the things that they're doing in their libraries. So it's real solutions for libraries. And then the certification program, of course, which I've described. What I didn't mention yet is that each library that signs up is assigned a mentor, and those mentors have been through the program. So they are a wealth of experience and information and can really help you stay on track and stay motivated as you go through the process. And you have myself, and we have another staff member, Francesca, who's here with us today too. But really what we have too is a scheduled mentor member meetup. So every month, members who are available get together and share resources. And we have had some really amazing ideas. And again, as our network is growing, we have more and more. We have libraries from California signing on now, our Vermont libraries. So we have this network of libraries of all sizes learning from each other, sharing resources, and just contributing to growing our practice of what is possible to do at a library of any size. So I'm going to stop there.
Annemarie, awesome job. And I just wanted to say that this is not a business. This is volunteers actually created this. It was born at the New York Library Association by a group of like-minded people. We do have paid staff now to support people in the program, but any fees that are charged are just cost recovery to support the program. So not in it for the money, as I'm sure many of you are not in your profession for the money either. So we just wanted to share our contact information in case that's helpful to folks, or you want to reach out with questions or ideas. I'll be honest with you, and recover your ears here. I don't even care if you sign up for the certification program. I just want to see more libraries owning this topic and doing work in this area. And if you want third-party certification to elevate your profile on the topic in your community, knock on our door, we'll help you out with it. But just sign up for the newsletter and learn what other people are doing. You can learn so much just from watching other folks in that program and building that community of practice with us. So here's our contact info, and we're happy to answer any questions that have come up. I saw a little activity in the chat box while we were talking, but I think we're hanging out here for another few minutes. So we'll turn it back over to your organizers today.
Thank you very much. It's so much to take in, but so many great ideas. I really appreciate it. I'm Judy Russell from the Lyme Library. I'm a member of the NHLA Sustainability Committee, and I have volunteered to sort of facilitate the Q&A portion today, and there has been a little bit of activity in the chat, and I have made it disappear on my screen, but it has been primarily about electric vehicle charging stations and what we are eligible as libraries in New Hampshire to apply for in terms of any grants that are around. And you can read through the chat on all of that, but if anybody wants to speak up, Brittany, I know that you replied with all the facts, as Heather said. If you want to address that, and then we can move on to maybe some other questions for Rebekkah and Annemarie.
Sure. So I'm not an expert on this, but I did know some folks who were going through this process in a town in Bristol. And the last time that New Hampshire was giving funding out, they're really trying to spread the charging stations throughout the state. So they wanted to make sure, you know, they weren't clustered all in Manchester. So the eligibility requirements were pretty strict. I would say that the article or the link that Mary put out, if folks want to speak up and say, you know, hey, think about libraries, think about that we are community hubs and that we can, you know, we have a lot of people coming here and we can help promote these, and we can also provide information about the benefits of electric vehicles and other sustainable practices. That might do really well and bode well for us in terms of us being eligible with the next round of funding that comes through. I did have a question since I'm unmuted. I'm curious, I've been thinking, Annemarie and Rebekkah, about triple bottom line, and do you have any suggestions on what is a good way to start everything that we do in libraries? How do we start thinking of that through a triple bottom line lens?
Yeah, I'll share that in my organization, we did a staff survey. We did a little presentation to staff, and then we did a staff survey to ask them what they thought was the important things to work on. And then our team came together. And honestly, the most impactful thing was the ambassadors on our team. So for example, we had our financial assistant who orders all the office supplies. And once she got a hold, I just made a little sheet for her of like what to look for when she was shopping for office supplies. You know, look for forest stewardship certified paper, or look for reusable pens. And she went to town on that. And then every time people were coming down to get paper or pens, she'd be like, you know, we just bought this more environmentally conscientious paper and it cost less. And she just started, like, it was like word of mouth in the organization. And so supervisors were asked at every meeting to say, when is it appropriate to call the question? Like when you're talking about a program, or, you know, what's the project you're working on? Is there some element of it that deserves that lens or that framework to think it through? So it was definitely staff education based, and then just pointing to some specific points where it could be used. And it was like, a muscle that people just started to exercise. And now I have to say, after several years of working on it, I don't really have to say anything. My staff will come to me and tell me I forgot to turn my light off, or, you know, new folks start, and I will hear them say, this is how we do it at Mid-Hudson. We compost this. And so I feel like that groundswell of like ownership was the absolute key to it not just being a one-off kind of thing where it's actually part of our culture now, was very important. So maybe just starting small with a little bit of education about office supplies or recycling. And I don't think it has to be everything all at once, which that's where we get lost in the conversation sometimes. And Brittany, I hope you don't mind. I just want to follow up what we were saying about the advocacy work in New Hampshire. I would say, don't just leave it to chance. Like maybe come up with a form letter and share it out with all the directors and trustees in the state and say, contact your representatives and see if they could help maybe make this a thing, because people don't think of libraries the way we wish they would. And sometimes we have to put that in their hands and the words in their mouth. And they're often just grateful for the idea. Like they're struggling themselves to make the connection. And when you point out there's a library in almost every little town throughout the state, and what a good job we do on this topic already, they might be like, oh, sold, done. You just solved a huge problem for us. So I'm all about the advocacy end of this. I hope you'll organize around that issue.
Thanks, Rebekkah. I agree too. And I'm thinking, on the one hand, this is a great project for our sustainability committee, but I would also I'd say at the same time that in order for us to remain sustainable, I would love to have more members, right? Brittany and Sandra, and there are really 4 active members right now, and we have many, many more ideas than what we're able to manage at the moment. So if people are interested in joining yet another committee, we do good work, and Brittany keeps us really organized. So just a little shout out for that.
Absolutely. And that's part of it too, is like, just to also to answer the first question, like one of the library directors who's become certified has just said, like, she just repeats it. She repeats it all the time. Like, we're a sustainable library and we're making decisions this way, and both to the staff, but also to the community when she points things out. Like, there's always opportunities to like reiterate that message. And she found just like that nothing works as well as just mentioning it anytime it's appropriate, and and then has heard that echoed through the staff, on all levels of like, oh, well, we can't do that, we're a sustainable library, or this is how we do it. Like Rebekkah said, we're a sustainable library. And on the EV chargers, I know in Suffolk County, what the county decided to do was that by putting EV charging stations in the library parking lots, the town can now plug in their electric vehicles on off hours. But with those charging stations there, they're open to the public during library hours when the vehicles are actually being used. So they're used overnight. So it's solving a problem that the town had, which is how are we going to charge these when we electrify our fleet, with something that also makes them available to the public when they're not needed by the town.
Right. Brittany brings up the topic of sustainable collections in our libraries and what you think that looks like. Is it, print books remain popular, if I can add in my thoughts on this too. But is a sustainable collection digital only? And then my other little question to tag on to the end of that is, what is the alternative to plastic book covers?
That's a question I've gotten quite a bit before. Actually, I do have a vendor on my vendor list. So I can fish that up and tell you there are some bioplastics available, but I believe it's a company in the UK who does work with libraries in the States. I know my county, we've pretty much just eliminated book covers altogether to avoid plastic.
So the first half of that one, sure. So I think the collections area of the certification program, it gives you time to think about very specific things in your collection management policy about, in particular, disposal, like for the print collection. Like, what are you doing with stuff after you've deselected it, shall we say, and what that looks like. But I think there's also the idea of balance in our collections of what topics we're developing collections on, and that goes across print and digital. So we're not here to make a stand on no travel or kill the books, or on the other end of it, taking a look at the power it takes to run all the servers to provide the overdrive collection or our digital resources as well, which is a major consideration. So I think it's creating awareness around the choices that we are making, that they are part of our carbon footprint as we make decisions. But I think we also need to find the balance of social equity and where people are. There are folks that receive information better in the written word, and that might need to be physical. There are people that need to be able to make the font bigger or have a different background, and that's going to require a digital collection in some ways. So we're not here to make value judgments on things like that. We're just helping people be more mindful as they make the choices and to think through some things that we've seen libraries just maybe not realize could have a better choice made about them in the area of weeding or the collection development or what displays we're doing or how we're getting folks stuff in their hands. We want things to be inclusive as well. So you'll actually find that we promote the Wisconsin Department of Libraries product. It's not a product really, it's a checklist of inclusivity. And one of their areas they take a look at is collection management, as well as many other aspects of library work. So it's really just an opportunity. It's like an excuse to think about it, think it through, right? We've all got so much going on, and I'd love to go spend some time on that. But this creates a structured path, like, oh, I'm at that point in the program. Yeah. Now we're going to spend an hour this month thinking about this. So it gives you the space and time to think it through.
So we'll find that link to the Wisconsin libraries on the Sustainable Libraries Initiative website, or?
I think it is linked there, and it's also embedded in the certification program. But if you can't find
Yeah.
it, just let us know. It's
Awesome.
absolutely freely available through the Wisconsin department site.
So at my library, we're working on our strategic plan for the next 10 years, and we are using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as our basis. And I'm really excited about it. And I'm excited about taking a leadership role in the community, moving things toward the direction of a sustainable community. However, one of the things that comes up for me over and over again, we're a small library, is the sustainability of our staff. And when we do position ourselves as community leaders, we take on, in a way, added responsibility, at least from our own sort of personal, ambitions, I guess, to really fulfill that role well. So, in 5 minutes or less, can you address this staff sustainability issue? I know that you talked about living wages, which I totally agree with.
I think a lot of it's about attitude and how you talk about what you do. So sometimes it's not about the extras that you add on through your planning process, but it's the focus that you bring to the story you're telling about who the library is in the community. So when we think about if you weren't able to grow the staff at all today, and you want to deploy them in the most effective way possible on behalf of the community, you have to make hard choices. There's some things that they're going to do, but you can influence how they do them. So maybe it's how they talk about what you do. If they're going to seek a partnership, which partnership are you picking? And also, I think as the director, Judy, understanding that you aren't going to be the leader in the community, you're going to be a co-creator in the community. You're going to find others who are doing work, and it's probably things you have to do anyway, right? To get the word out about the library and show up at community events or go to the chamber breakfast. But it's, while you're there looking for folks that are doing work in a similar theme, perhaps, or a similar way, that you can kind of nudge and say, hey, you want to partner up on a program? And maybe it's just really small. So I think it doesn't have to be you lead the disaster preparedness team for the town, but maybe starting really small in what is comfortable for you, or maybe just making a different choice about things that you're already kind of doing, but doing them with purpose in this particular direction.
Yeah. Great answer. Thank you. Anybody else? Just go ahead and speak up. We're a small group. And
this is more of a comment or an appreciation than a question, but it feels like a lot of this is take a look at what you're already doing and think about how to reframe your narrative about it, right? So the knitting group that meets weekly at your library is an opportunity for cultivating social cohesion, which then goes a long way. And it's that sort of subtle background, not what I think we all think about libraries as community centers and community building. And certainly there are folks in the community who we're definitely their third place, right? We're where they come to be seen and known. But there other people just think, oh, it's the place with the books. So just incorporating into our narrative, hey, and being more deliberate. We're looking at things from this triple bottom line. And one of them is this building resilience and social cohesion. And guess what? Our knitting group does that. So I really appreciated hearing that perspective. Thank you.
Well, Sandra, I remember when Amy Lappin invited me to speak in 2019 in New Hampshire. And when I was done, she's like, oh, I didn't realize we were doing an advocacy workshop today.
yeah.
But that's a lot of what we're trying to do. And a lot of my background, which I did not speak about, is in New York, we have public budget votes on our library budgets. And we have to win over people every year to tax themselves more for library services. And how are we making that case? How are we talking about what we're doing in a way that's meaningful, that connects with folks that both use our services on a regular basis and those that never walk through our door? So I think elevating how we speak about what we contribute to the community, how we're helping to shape the future, speaking to building a brighter future for our students and our young people. These are things that folks will connect with, even if they don't come in and borrow a book or come to the knitting program or need to use your computers. And so part of this is absolutely talking points, but they need to be authentic.
Mhm.
So that's why we really want libraries to do the work inside. And I often use the phrase from the inside out, that you do work inside the organization so that when you use those talking points in your annual report to the community or your budget hearing or whatever you're, working on your capital campaign, you can with confidence point to the work that you've done and the example that you've set. And it really rings true with more people that are perhaps outside of your circle currently.
And a lot of the work, the work that we intend, as part of the certification or just as part of like moving the needle towards sustainability, should be moving the decisions and the actions and the practices that you're already engaged in towards more sustainable practices. It shouldn't be adding a whole additional, job. Like, I'm just going to save climate change on top of my full-time job right now. Like, no, it should be, working within your capacity and this is decisions that you're making currently to move the needle towards that, rather than building on, one more thing. And we hope obviously that like you can find ways, when you do have time to do more, that those will be more things to add on this too. But you'll find when you really start looking, or as like Rebekkah said, as you start flexing those muscles, that there's more and more ways that you hadn't thought of before that can be brought in and looked at through the lens of triple bottom line sustainability.
This holistic approach, approaching sustainability from all these different angles, it just lights a fire under me. I don't know about other people, but I just find it so exciting that there are so many different ways to get at this and to make a difference. So I really appreciate all the thinking that you all have done and the organizing of information.
Well, I hope you saw that the link to the inclusivity assessment from
great.
Wisconsin is in the chat box, and also Annemarie provided the book cover source that's been identified by some of our members.
Thank you. And Leslie added that you use the Colibri covers, and I guess that they must be are they a recyclable plastic or something? Or bio? Where'd she go? Oh, she's behind the lion.
I think they're made from sugarcane.
Oh, yeah.
The covers.
And they hold up.
It's a good exercise, right? In doing the cost benefit analysis of making a more environmentally friendly choice, but what is the cost to the library? And so as Annemarie said, some libraries have come to the conclusion, maybe we should just stop putting covers on books.
Yeah. Do you tape the covers, the jackets, Annemarie? I'm sorry, Leslie.
I've seen them reinforced on the spine. But yeah, someone had asked that question. I thought, yeah, I haven't seen plastic covers on books in a couple of years now.
Yeah, so we use them and we're happy with them, and they break down their bio, whatever. It's important to know that with the covers, because we started off with Colibri with their regular covers. And of course, years ago, we used to use just whatever the jobbers sent us. They don't hold up as long as the jobber covers, so we do replace, but we cover our paperbacks now. And so we don't replace those as often. So it's a little bit of a trade.
And the paperback covers, are they sustainable, or are they the heavy duty stuff that?
Yeah, no, they're the same.
They're the same.
I'm not even sure that Colibri is still, I know they were phasing out. I'm
Oh.
not sure they're even still selling any that aren't their eco product line.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Brittany, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I realize it's just after 11. So thank you so much, Annemarie and Rebekkah. This has really, really been wonderful. Unless there's any last pressing questions, which I don't see in the chat. Going once, twice. All right. Thank you both so much. And thank you to everyone who came and everyone who is on the sustainability committee for being here and helping to make this happen, especially Sandra, you've done a lot of work on this. So thank you.
My
I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if anyone is interested in the sustainability committee, please reach out to me. We would love to have more people join us on putting events like this together. So again, thank you so much, Annemarie and Rebekkah.
Thank you.
Thank you
For having us.